My name is John Mason and I'm the Member of the Scottish Parliament for Glasgow Shettleston. That is in the east end of Glasgow, which is traditionally one of the poorer areas of Glasgow and of Scotland. Also, I am a member of a Baptist church, which is part of the Christian faith. I think our emphasis would be that every individual needs to make a decision about their faith. It's not what you're born into, it's what you choose to follow. And clearly we are living in quite a secular society nowadays. Many people in Scotland would not say they had any faith at all. So I'm in a minority in that I take faith quite seriously. I've got huge respect. As I said, we're living in a very secular society in Scotland and the UK these days, and I have a huge respect for people of faith who believe in a faith, almost whichever it is really, because that is a minority in this country, and I think we have a lot in common. So we need to work together on areas which we have in common. So clearly I am not a Muslim, but I have a lot of respect for Muslims who are serious about their faith. I stand to be corrected, but my understanding is certainly in Christianity we have some people who are serious about their faith and other people who are more, it's more a cultural thing. The same I think would be true in Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, all the major faiths. But I suppose especially Islam, Judaism, Christianity, we're monotheistic, we believe in one God. So that does give us a certain connection. But reading about it, which has been fairly recently, I would confess, is very interesting. And the first thing I would say was I would like to read more about it. So if you can recommend a book to me, then I would be happy to have a read at that. But my first impression, if you like, maybe that's an advantage because I'm quite new to it and can be genuine, was about someone who had principles and someone who was not just out for themselves and someone who was prepared to make a sacrifice. And I can talk more about that later, but these were the kind of things that particularly struck me about his life and obviously his death. My starting point is that we can all learn from everyone else, and that whoever I meet, there is something I can learn from that person, and that everybody, ultimately I believe we're all made in the image of God, so we all have something in us that God has given us, but also at the same time we've all sinned, we're all fallen in some way. So whenever I look at anybody, be it historical or be it currently, I'm looking for things I can learn from, because there's things there that I can learn, and there's other things that maybe I don't want to copy. And that would certainly be true from what I know of Hussain at this stage. Some of these points which I've already mentioned, and having principles and living by them, that is such an important thing for us today. And maybe even more in the West than it is in parts of the rest of the world, because people are so materialistic. They are really only interested in many people are only interested in money, what they can earn, what they can get. Things like loyalty, like sticking to your principles, like holding to promises, which he did, not breaking a promise, even the promise was made by someone else. These are great principles, which I think we desperately need today. And perhaps especially in politics, because politics is a very short-term thing. People are not patient, they worry about tomorrow's headline. He was somebody who I think waited quite a number of years before he would even take up leadership, because he felt he would be breaking a treaty or breaking a promise because of that. And I'm afraid in the West, in Scotland, these kind of principles and living by these principles are a bit unusual, and we do need more of them. There's a lot of things that bring about mutual trust and understanding. But if we actually understand the story of people, and what has been happening, why they are where they are, why they've come here, why we've gone there, all of these things, why they believe what they believe, that helps us, I think, understand. I think in all cultures there can be a fear of what's different, we don't understand, we have misconceptions about other people, and that certainly includes faith. So the more facts we can get, the more knowledge we have. And I certainly, as I say, living in such a secular society as we are here, the big difference is not between, in many ways, Christians and Muslims and Jews. The big difference is between those of us who believe and those of us who have no faith, which is the majority. So I want to learn from all the faiths, and as I say, I think they all have stemmed from God. Clearly, we would disagree on all the details of it. But that means that I want to learn from Hussain, I want to learn from Muslims generally, Jews, Hindus, etc. Thinking through, I think there was kind of 6 strengths of Hussain or whatever characteristics that jumped out at me, and some of them I was thinking about parallels between them and in Christianity as well. So for one was the patience of waiting to take on, become the leader. And actually that's David, who was a king in Jewish history, which we also see as part of our history and our scriptures. And David was appointed by God to be king, but there already was a king, which was Saul. And David waited, despite encouragements to do otherwise, he waited until Saul was out the picture, till God removed Saul, before David took over the kingship. And that struck me as a bit of a parallel with Hussein, who I think was encouraged to take on leadership. However, he felt that he was bound by the previous treaty until the Caliph, I think, died. And only then would he take on leadership. So that would be one item. I mean, another one would be sacrifice, which is very strong in both, I think, Jewish and Muslim and Christian tradition, going right back to, like, Abraham would have been willing to sacrifice his son Isaac. And then we as Christians believe that that's really why Jesus came, to be a sacrifice. Now, I know that is not the interpretation of other faiths of Jesus, but that would be our interpretation. So for us, sacrifice, so therefore continuing as Christians, I should be willing to sacrifice my own pleasure and success and these things for the good of the community, for God, and so on. And so I think there's a parallel there as well, with Hussein being willing, he was willing not to take on leadership, as I understand it, if the people did not want him to, but was also willing to be in leadership if that was wanted. And seeing himself as a servant, again, so much leadership in the world today, and I think right back in these days, was about people lording it over other people. Whereas what I see in his example, and I would see in Christian example as well, is the idea of being a servant leader, so that you are there to serve the people that you're leading. And yes, you can be a leader, yes, you can be a strong leader, but you're there to serve. And I think, I don't see that in many politicians these days. I don't always see it in faith leaders either. But I think for me, it's a key strength, value, characteristic that we can learn from each other, and he would be an example of somebody doing that. Sticking to principles and not being unbending, because I don't think he was, but that can be quite a challenge at times, that you are sticking to your principles, but you're also serving people, loving people, all of these kind of things, and accepting that people are not perfect. But I think, sometimes I put my neck out, I try and make a stand on things, I get mocked or teased or opposed even by my own party sometimes, and yet he was prepared to stick to his principles. So I think if there's one thing that I'm taking from him at the moment, it would probably be that. These issues of not putting yourself forward and or at least not putting yourself first. I mean, he had gifts, we've all got gifts, and we should use these gifts. So it's not that we have to be doormats and just let people walk over us. But there's a kind of balance in going to the other extreme of always putting ourselves first and only being interested in ourselves. And frankly, in the West today, the sense of community and that we have a responsibility for our neighbours is quite weak, I would have to say. It's not extinct, and it is there in some people. But that kind of concern for the community, prepared to give yourself up and sacrifice your own ideals for the good of the community, would be strengths that I very much admire. Another issue would be duty. I think that duty is not a popular word, I think, these days, and people talk about their rights a lot, and they don't talk so much about their duties. And I think that's something I see in Hussein's life, that he obviously had a sense of duty. Maybe at that time it was a stronger sense everywhere, I don't know, but taking up leadership, I think, can be a duty, but that can also be seen as a right for some people as well, because of his, he was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, so that was a big issue, and that was clearly put him in a certain position. But I think to both duty and then holding to promises, that is another weakness I see in our current society, and sometimes sadly even in faith communities as well, that promises have been made, treaties had been made that he was not party to, but he adhered to them and felt bound to them. And some people do not even adhere to promises that they have made themselves, and especially being in politics, as you can probably understand, that is an issue I see quite a lot, that people make promises. Probably they shouldn't make the promises in the first place, but if they do make them, we should be adhering to them. And in our scriptures, certainly Christian scriptures and Jewish scriptures, making an oath or making a promise or making a treaty are really, really important things. And we believe also that God made promises like to Abraham, and that if we make promises to each other, these are very strong. And Jesus himself said to us that if we say yes, it's to be yes, and if we say no, it's to be no. So we should be completely trustworthy. And that certainly impressed me, this whole area, that until the other side broke the treaty and I think installed the wrong person to be the Imam or the Caliph or whatever, he felt that he was very much bound by that commitment, that treaty, that promise. So that's an area too that our society, Western society, I think very much needs to learn from. Scotland and the UK used to be very much what was called a Christian country, and some people think they're Christians because they live here, and I think people from other countries sometimes think that everybody here are Christians. But that has very much changed, I think, during my lifetime as well. And firstly, many people have drifted away from a strong faith of any kind, but it's clearly here that means mainly from a Christian position. But also now we have a much more mixed community within the East End of Glasgow, which I represent. When I was younger, it was entirely white and everyone spoke English. And now we have a whole host of languages, and if you go on the bus or the train, it's never all white. There's always a whole mixture of people. And I think that's very, very positive. And we're seeing, therefore people are interacting now with other faiths. But I see that amongst, largely in Glasgow, it's the Pakistani community, which would be one of the main minority ethnic communities, and they've been there the longest, and they are represented in the Parliament. But I see too what I would consider Muslims who have a very strong faith and are very committed and serious about their faith. And I see others who that is their background, but they have become more secular, more perhaps materialistic, and these things. And I just see that across the board. I think it's a fact, but I think it makes it all the more important that those of us who are committed to our faith and believe in God and are praying and seeking God's will and all these things should be able to work together when we are in agreement. And especially on many moral issues, we have so much in common, and we have moral issues in the Scottish Parliament, like abortion, like assisted suicide, like same-sex marriage, where I think there would be a lot of agreement amongst those of us who are serious, whether it's serious Christians, Muslims, Jews, or some of the other faiths as well. So we have a group in the Scottish Parliament which is about religious freedom and or even freedom to believe nothing. I believe that very much as well. And so it's an area I'm very interested in. Both, I've got my personal faith, which I'm totally committed to, but I also want to have a relationship with and I very much respect people of other faiths. I myself lived in Nepal for a number of years, so that was mainly a Hindu country, so most of my interaction there was with Hindus. But again, it was true of them that some of them were more serious about their faith. But I find I can relate better to somebody who's got a strong faith, even if it's different from mine, than somebody who has no faith at all and is living in two dimensions effectively.